Hello viewers, this is Paladin of Odin, and this is some more Magic the Gathering Online. This is another episode of the Standard Commentary series, and I decided to start recording this episode because I saw a card that I haven't seen before, and I'm quite intrigued. This guy has a Sultai Skullkeeper, which is a 2-mana 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield, put the top two cards of your library into your graveyard. And he hit a pair of Sultai Skullkeepers. And the other side has Jace Vryn's Prodigy. He just played an Elvish Visionary, followed up by Sidisi's Faithful, exploiting itself to send the Skullkeeper back to his hand. So his deck appears to be 4C Rally. The other side, I honestly don't know. So the Skullkeeper comes back down, hits 2 land. Now the Rally deck I'm quite familiar with. It's quite a simple concept, really. They either get their, sacrifice machine out for, the typical aristocrat setup, or they get things out, they die, you play Rally, bring them back from the graveyard, and then do the typical aristocrat's sacrifice combination. And there's Catacomb Sifter. Jace has been flipped. Attacking in with the Elvish Visionary. No block, he takes the 1 damage. Second main phase. He does not activate Jace. But then again, he probably isn't very worried about this 2/1. But at the same time, why would you miss getting to put a counter on Jace? Screeching Scab, or is it Scab, or is it Scab? I don't know. Same ability though, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard when it hits the field, and it's a 2/1, and it's 2 mana. Ah, it's a Delve deck. He plays Hooting Mandrills, delving a lot of his graveyard, so now he has a 4/4 trample. Jace activates to shrink the Mandrills down to a 2/4. And he chooses not to attack. He's playing it safe, which I don't blame him. The Rally deck really isn't very aggressive. They much prefer to be able to set up all their pieces of their machine so that when the time comes, they can, a lot of the time, kill you in a single move. So Kiora, Master of the Depths, he immediately -2s. Gets rid of Gather the Pack, Swamp, and Stubborn Denial. And end of combat, he plays Collected Company, the other combo-like card for the Rally deck. Most of their deck is comprised of creatures, and the rest is Collected Company and Ancestors, Rally the Ancestors. Collected Company hits a Sidisi's Faithful, so he exploits it and bounces the Hooting Mandrills back to the Delve deck's hand. And, as an added benefit, he gets to scry with Catacomb Sifter, and he keeps the card on top of his deck. And then it goes back to the Rally deck. He is going to flashback Collected Company. And if you're not familiar with the term, flashback is a keyword that was used during the Odyssey block, and that's effectively what Jace's -3 ability is. So Collected Company hits Grim Haruspex and a Sidisi's Faithful. He exploits the Faithful. He's going to bounce the Skull Keeper, back to his hand, which lets him scry 1, puts the card on the bottom, and then he draws his card with the Grim Haruspex. And as you can see, he's got quite a bit of his machine all ready to go. He draws a card every time a creature dies, and he gets to scry one every time a creature dies. The only two things that he's really missing right now are Nantuko Husk, his sacrifice engine, and Zulaport Cutthroat, the direct damage engine off of the Nantuko Husk. He's attacking all in here. The Screeching Scob is blocking the Eldrazi Scion, since it can't go to the graveyard, so there's no way for him to get it back. The other two hit Kiora and kill her. He does get the scry off of the Scion token. He keeps the card on top of his library. And I really don't know what this Delve deck has up his sleeve. Or, in this case, in his deck. He really needs to be able to clear this board. Well, okay, so another Screeching Scob. Gets rid of Tassiger and Gurmag Angler. Now, there are some delve options that he could be using. Treasure Cruise, Dig Through Time, Murderous Cut would be a pretty good idea. Preferably, in his situation, I'd rather have two so that I could kill the Haruspex first, followed with the Catacomb Sifter. He plays a Hooting Mandrills. In response, he activates Jace. He sacrifices the 3 counter Jace to keep the 5 counter Jace. Another option that the Delve deck should have in his library is things like, well, Crux of Fate would be really good for him, and oh man, I can't believe I forgot the name of that card. I can see the art in my mind. I know exactly what it does. I know its mana cost. I guess it's just one of those days. The 4-drop, everything gets -4/-4 sorcery. It's just one of those days. And here's Rally of the Ancestors, or Rally the Ancestors, excuse me. He does have a Husk in his graveyard that he gets back, but he didn't have the other key component, the Zulaport Cutthroat. But the Delve deck decides he'd rather move on to Game 2 than watch the Rally deck go through the motions of sacrificing a whole bunch of stuff, drawing a whole bunch of cards, and so on and so forth. So, on to Game 2. Okay, second turn, Screeching Scob gets rid of a land and a Skullkeeper. Second turn, he plays Jace, Vryn's Prodigy. And he's well on his way to being able to flip Jace. He had 2 fetch lands. And yes, Evolving Wilds is a fetch land. It effectively does the same thing, just for a basic land, and it doesn't cost you a life. He plays a Skullkeeper and gets rid of 2 lands, so he's well on his way to being able to delve for an early Hooting Mandrills, provided he gets a green mana. Unfortunately for him, that's what the Skull Hunter just got rid of. Or Skullkeeper. God. He activates Jason, discards a Rally the Ancestors. Anytime you see that, you always have to wonder, what exactly is in his hand that Rally is the best card to discard there? Here comes the Fleshbag Marauder. Gets rid of the Skullkeeper. Marauder dies because he'd much rather have Jace. It was just an easy way to minimize the field. Painful Truths. 3 colors, he draws 3 cards and loses 3 life, and he did in fact get a green mana. In comes the Scob for 2 damage, brings him down to 15. And things are moving along quite quickly. Activating Jace for the 5th card into his graveyard, discarding Nantuko Husk. Jace flips. Let's see if he remembers to activate him. Collected Company. He gets a Grim Haruspex and a Sidisi's Faithful. He exploits the Faithful to itself, gets to draw a card off the Haruspex, and bounces the Screeching Scob back to his hand. And he remembers to +1 Jace. Now, in the last game, it didn't come to anything, but, you have time. Don't rush yourself. Go through, all your pieces so that you don't miss simple things like that. And Ob Nixilis reignited. He -3s to kill the Haruspex. And the great thing for him is that Haruspex doesn't let him draw a card when it dies. And another collected company. Gets a Nantuko Husk and an Anafenza the Foremost. Well, things are not looking good for the Delve deck. He can't -3 Ob Nixilis to kill either of these creatures. He +1s to draw a card and lose a life. Now would be a really good time to board clear. Screeching Scob again. That gets rid of 2 lands. He's pretty good on mana, so that's probably a pretty good thing for him. Cranial Archive. 2-drop, 2 to activate, exile it. Target player shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library and then draw a card. That is one really messed up piece of art, though. So back to the Rally deck. He hardcasts a DC's Faithful, which we haven't seen him do, I don't think. Might have been once during the first game. He exploits the Faithful, bouncing the Scob back to his hand again. Keeps the board clear. He does have access to black mana, so he could Murderous Cut here. But he'd have to do it before combat so that the Husk doesn't get a +1/+1 counter from Anafenza. And Grim Haruspex. That would have been the perfect time to Murderous Cut, so that he wouldn't get a card from you killing his creature, and Husk wouldn't have gotten a counter. But he must not have it, so both creatures are going at Ob Nixilis. Ob Nixilis dies. Screeching Scob hits the field again. And I have to say, it's looking like there's a glaring issue in this guy's deck list that he doesn't have removal. It looks like the whole point of his deck is to try and... Oh, he does have a little bit of removal, Sultai Charm. He just lost that, though, to one of his Screeching Scobs. Destroy target monocolored creature. That would help him against the Husk or the Grim Haruspex. But it really looks like he doesn't have much in the way of removal, and that is a glaring omission on his part, because his deck appears to be far too fragile. It's all about these little guys that mill yourself so that you can play bigger things with Delve. Merciless Executioner gets rid of the small Scob. I mean, we've seen Tassiger and Hooting Mandrills. And Mandrills really isn't that big of a creature compared to the things that Rally can do. Especially when he has a Jason play that can just shrink it every round. I like the idea of trying to build a Delve deck, but it looks like he forgot some key components to try and keep himself alive while he's trying to get to the Delve cards that he needs to win the game. Like Murderous Cut, which the Rally deck plays to kill the other Screeching Scob. Ooh, Dispel to counter it. So he'll keep a blocker. It will... he's going to put a +1/+1 counter on the Haruspex. So, whatever the Scob blocks isn't going to die, so he blocks the 4/4 to reduce as much damage as possible. He still takes 7 and goes down to 10. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but, at that point, he had to board clear or he was going to die. And he drew his card and conceded. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see a very good showing from that Delve deck. Mainly because I think it has some serious deck list problems. But, that's the match, folks. That was Sultai Delve versus 4C Rally, excuse me. And if you liked what you saw, hit that like and subscribe button for me, and I'll see you in the next video.